Welcome to this presentation for my signature project in my psychology class. For my signature project, I chose to do a research paper about prosocial behavior. And prosocial behavior is an interesting topic because helping people, as it turns out, brings about significant psychological benefits. There are probably a lot of reasons why prosocial behavior tends to increase well-being, but my research seems to point to self-determination theory, which is that we try to fill needs for competence, autonomy, and relatedness, which means we want to feel like we can do things and accomplish tasks or solve problems for competence. And autonomy means we want to feel like we are our own agents. We can do what we choose to do without being told. And relatedness meaning we want to feel related to people. We want to have social connections. I found 3 articles that described some experiments and studies that support the idea of self-determination theory being the reason behind our prosocial behavior. The first study was by Frank Martella and Richard Ryan in the Motivation and Emotion Journal, and they wanted to know if contact with the beneficiary was the cause of increased well-being in people who perform prosocial acts. For this study, they would need to create a situation in which participants would help others without actually having contact with them. Participants would participate in prosocial behavior by using the free Rice website, which allows a small short quizzes to be presented to the participant, and for each correct answer, 10 grains of rice would be donated to help the hungry. The control group would also play the same game, but they were uninformed of the 10 grains of rice being donated. So to the control group, there would be no feelings of acting prosocially. Interestingly, the group that was informed, the experimental group, did show an increase in well-being, where the control group did not show an increase in well-being from the activity. Different things were measured, including well-being, beneficence, and especially need satisfaction by questionnaires, so results were subjective. The need satisfaction was measured to test the fulfillment of needs from self-determination theory. So that means competence, autonomy, and relatedness. Competence and autonomy were increased in the experimental group. So this experiment shows that prosocial behavior does contribute to fulfilling competence and autonomy needs, although it does not demonstrate the fulfillment of need for relatedness. In fact, the study was designed to see if relatedness was the main factor or not. The need for relatedness does indeed contribute to our motivation to be prosocial, and another study talks about that, which we will talk about later. But for now, there is another study by the same people, Martella and Ryan, which was not an experiment, but it was a series of cross-sectional studies to determine the relationship between prosocial behavior and the fulfillment of needs for self-determination. Just focusing on one study, which consisted of 335 people, these people would take a survey that asked questions such as, I have given money to charity and I have gone out of my way to help a stranger in need. These questions were meant to determine prosocial behavior, and questions such as, I am satisfied with my life, would determine subjective well-being. This study, along with the 3 other studies that were performed, showed that prosocial behavior would lead to a feeling of beneficence, which means they felt like they helped people, and that in turn made them feel better. They had an increased sense of well-being. According to the author, quote, our first general hypothesis was that the positive well-being benefits of prosocial behavior are at least partially explained by an increased sense of autonomy, competence, and relatedness. In general, all present studies supported this hypothesis. So they concluded that increased prosocial behavior also increased feelings of autonomy, competence, and relatedness in relation to self-determination theory. The final article that I discovered describes a little bit more of a complex experiment that was performed, but the purpose of the experiment was to see if those who felt excluded but hoped to be able to regain inclusion would behave more prosocially than people who already were included. This experiment was performed with some students and needed to provide a situation in which students either felt included or excluded from a group. So students took a personality test and were given some false feedback about their personality. Excluded students got a feedback that said because of their personality they would end up alone in life. They would then participate in a false grouping system in which students would supposedly be presented with the profiles of 3 other students and would choose which one they preferred to group with. The excluded individuals were told that nobody wanted to group with them, and so that they would just be grouped with others who had the same situation. The purpose of this was to make the student feel excluded and unwanted so that it could be tested whether they would act more prosocially to regain inclusion. They would then participate with their supposed online group in a game in which points could be earned, and those points could then be exchanged for actual money. After the game, the amount of money earned was shown, and students were allowed to donate to those in need if they so chose. Results showed that the excluded individuals donated more money than included individuals who did not receive the exclusion treatment. So this experiment shows how a need for relatedness can motivate people to behave more prosocially. This actually made me think about times where maybe I've felt excluded and have wanted to regain inclusion and so therefore have acted more prosocially. I think that'd be a fun activity for those of you watching to do, to reflect on that and notice if that's happened to you also. So I think that these studies have shown that an increase of competence, relatedness, and autonomy, they all motivate us to perform prosocially, and performing prosocially indeed fulfills those needs. I believe there are many other benefits to prosocial behavior that have not been discussed, and those benefits might be worth researching and looking into. Either way, I hope this presentation has been helpful, and thank you for watching.